Good day, good day, good day, and welcome. Welcome to another Tuesday with Thom. It's Tuesday, December 8th, and again, welcome to another Tuesday with Thom. Brought to you by the Best Girl Consulting Firm. Best Girl consults with utilities, higher ed institutions, associations, and large nonprofits to customize solutions that support your bottom line. It is officially the Christmas season, and I just want to tell you about our upcoming shows for Christmas. They're going to be a lot of fun. December the 15th, next week, we will have what we call the reunion show, and I get to reunite with the guys that I played ball with, namely Mitzi Jackson, Cedric McIntyre, Sullivan Walker, and Reese Mychal. And we're going to have a very, very special guest to go along with that, a surprise guest, actually. And with the exception of James Owens, these gentlemen I just mentioned, Mitzi Jackson, Cedric McIntyre, Sullivan Walker, Reese Mychal, and myself, were the Black athletes who played for Shug Jordan at Auburn University in the early days of integration. And for those of you who don't know, Coach Jordan coached at Auburn for 25 years. He's in the College Football Hall of Fame. And he pretty much was one of the leaders in integration in the Southeastern Conference. With the exception of James Owens, these were the only Black athletes to play for Coach Jordan. So while we're mentioning James Owens, I want to just mention the fact that the university handed out the James Owens Award of Courage this past weekend when they played Texas A&M. They lost. That's nothing big this year, and they gave out the Courage Award, and the Courage Award is given to somebody who displays courage in the face of adversity, distinguishing himself while contributing to the betterment of the university. The award is named for James Owens because he was the first African-American athlete. And to give you some idea of the significance of James Owens being the first and only for at least 2 years. James says when he says you would have thought it was a parade. He says, recalling the cheers when he ran onto the field for the first time. He said, those Black people cheered and hollered. I was their hero, and they were my heroes. I realized I was there for more than James Owens. I was there for a nation and people who were depending on me to succeed. James played 3 seasons at Auburn. He helped Auburn to a 28-5 record and led the 1972 team, the Amazons, to a 10-1 record. So the Courage Award this year, and this is James won the initial Courage Award. This was the 9th, I think. Well, no, actually, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 award that they've given out, and it went to Brodarius Ham. He was the winner of the James Owens Courage Award, a senior right offensive tackle for Auburn University. He is number 59. You're talking about courage. He knows about tough battles. He survived cancer as a teenager, and then only to experience an even more devastating loss this year with the death of his son, Carter, in February. What is said about him, Coach Malzahn says he's a wonderful human being who's faced major adversity, whether it's been cancer when he first got here or losing his child, which was unbelievably hard. For him to battle, he's one of our starters. He's one of our leaders. He's respected by every one of his teammates. I can't say enough good things about Brodarius Ham. And so what I'd like to say is congratulations to Brodarius Ham on winning the James Owens Courage Award. And if you've known James Brodarius, you know how special that award is, not just to the university, but to all those who follow James Owens, who was a special, special, special man. Let's move on. Don't forget that Santa will be here on December 22nd. Santa will be here along with some Christmas caroling. I just found that out, but we'll have some Christmas caroling. Matter of fact, Santa Claus sings. So you know that's going to be really, really special, a singing Santa. And we're going to see if we can get Eric Jones to come back too. I've got to get that done. And he'll give you the history of the songs that Santa Claus sings. Think about that. Now, Santa Claus is going to sing it. Eric Jones is going to give you the history behind it. Also on December 22nd, it's another audience participation day. So be prepared to contact us regarding your favorite Christmas songs, your favorite Christmas movies, and your favorite Christmas stories. Okay, so today, Barbara Wallace Edwards is here, and Mychal Walker is here, and our G-list guest today is Ann Tucker, the chairwoman of the Tribal Council at Muscogee Nation of Florida. So let me introduce the two roundtable guests, and we'll have a little discussion before we go to Miss Tucker. Barbara Wallace Edwards. Barbara is retired. Barbara, are you there?
I'm here, Thom. Good
How are
morning.
you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing very well. So you're feeling better. You were a little
I
down.
am. I
Good.
am feeling much, much better. Thank you.
So tell me about your Christmas plans.
Well, it's going to be because of COVID. There's not going to be the large family gatherings this year, so still undecided whether I'll spend it here at home or visit just a small gathering of family members. But I'm looking forward to Christmas. This is my favorite time of the year, as I've said many, many times before. It brings back a lot of special memories with my family. So even though we're not going to have the huge gatherings like we normally have, it's still going to be a great Christmas.
Good deal. Good deal. Let's get Mychal Walker on here. And Mychal, how are you this morning?
I am doing well this morning, Thom. I hope you and Barbara both are doing well.
I'm doing very well. I agree with Barbara. It's Christmas season, man. It's a time to be happy and to be joyful. And we'll let the COVID be the COVID and stay out of its way and go from there. I'd like to, Mychal, what's happening in your world?
Well, let me tell you a couple things that's going on. Speaking of COVID, Thom, something just came across my desk this morning is that U.S. employers have a right to mandate COVID-19 vaccine, but will they? Because now that Pfizer and Moderna and AstraZeneca, they are all rolling out their penicillin or vaccination. But now we got to look at the legal side of it of U.S. companies or private companies mandating that their employers get vaccinated in order to continue to work or as a condition of employment. So it's going to be a tricky balancing act because from a legal standpoint, can they do that? And will people adhere to that? So get ready for some possible legal battles just from that. You would think that wouldn't be the case, but yes. And in the past, OSHA has said that companies can mandate inoculations. And, an employer, they've got to keep their employees safe.
Sure.
They got to keep their customers safe.
Right.
The trouble we already have with people wearing masks and the mandating a mask and all of that. Now we have vaccinations coming out. And so there are people like, well, they can't force me to get vaccinated. It's against my right. So what's going to happen?
Yeah. Okay. Barbara, what do you got for us?
Oh, Thom, yeah, I'm excited about the news that our Auburn alum, our fellow Auburn alum, General Lord Austin, a retired General Lord Austin, is being considered for the Secretary of Defense by President-elect Joe Biden. I'm not sure if you guys heard that information or not, but that's truly exciting, and hopefully he'll get approval. And he has to apply for a waiver because he's only been out of the military now for years, and normally you can't receive one of those type of positions unless you've been out for 7 years. So it'll be
For how many
interesting to
years?
watch to see what happens with that. 7 years is
Okay.
what the
And
normal
how
wait
long has he
time.
been out?
So he's only been 4 years.
Okay. Yeah, I've met General Austin. I think he's a fantastic guy. I certainly hope that it works out for him and for all of us. He's a great
Absolutely.
guy. Just for you guys discussion, I talked earlier about the Courage Award and James Owens and the Courage Award. And you know how I feel about James. Was quite a man, and James was a man when he was in college. At least that's how we felt about him. And those of us who followed him called him Daddy Owens because he was like our fathers. He was strong. He was quiet. He was solid. You never wanted Daddy to see you coming into your dorm room with a beer because Daddy wouldn't approve, you know. So I always tell my James Owen stories, but I think the thing that was great was we all called him Daddy, and that was just a measure of respect that we had for that man. Absolutely. I think you guys both knew him. Do you have any James Owen stories that you'd like to tell this morning?
I will tell you about my first time actually meeting James Owens. I met he and his wife at an Auburn event, alumni event, and it was such an interesting experience. I felt like I was in the presence of royalty. I mean, just meeting him for the very first time, I already had a really huge respect for him just based on the information I read about him. But meeting him, it was like an out-of-body experience. I truly felt like I was in the presence of someone who demanded respect and royalty. Not that he did anything to make me feel that way, but he was, I don't know, it's just his demeanor, his demeanor, like it demanded respect. And it's such a high respect for he and his family. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And his grandson is on the team, and he was down on the field as a part of that ceremony. Mychal, you knew him. You got a James Owen story for us?
Well, I always go back to the first time that I saw him on the football field, and I was in junior high school. And back then the thing was, to get over there to see the games, we'd always go sell Cokes on Saturday. So we'd make money, see the game for free, So I was selling Cokes in the stands, and I saw this guy come out of the tunnel. And of course, it was easy to see him. He was the only person with melon out there. And I remember looking, and I'm watching him play, and I'm like, who is that? And somebody go, you don't know? That's the Big O. And from that point on, I became a fan, and, as I recall, he played a lot of different positions, they would make him play fullback, or sometimes they would make him play running back. He played multiple positions, and whatever it was called for, he stepped up to the plate and he did it. So that was a sign of leadership right there, and unselfishness in a team sports.
Yeah, the big issue with James is he never got the ball enough. James averaged almost 6 yards a carry as a running back and 29 yards as a kick returner. And so, wow. I mean, those are pretty impressive statistics, but if you don't get the ball enough, it's a different story. I think the thing about James Owens, and I'm really proud of them for giving this award out. And I hope that the young men who have received it and the ones who will receive it will understand the significance of it and what it means and what he means. Just an incredible guy.
Both his nephew and his son has had an opportunity to play there at Auburn. And the players who interacted with both of those young men said that they felt like they were closer to James Owens and knew a lot more about him because they had an opportunity to experience, playing with family members of his. It told them a lot of personal stories about James Owens and his time at Auburn. So I think that carried a lot and meant a lot to those players who won the awards those couple of years.
Well, I'll just say that, I got to play his last year with him. And I'll tell you, you guys talk about the first time you saw him. First time I saw him was in Birmingham. I was at John Carroll High School, and we had like 170-pound linemen. So we weren't going to move many people around. And they came out on the field, and James was, and it's like, well, who is that? He had this horse collar on. He's about 200 pounds. And it's like, okay. When they open up that hole and he runs through it, Coach, who are you expecting to tackle this guy? I remember before the game, Coach, how they give you that speech. he puts his pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. No, coach, this dude hopped in those pants. He's special.
Absolutely.
Anything else from either one of you?
I just want to add that, for him to be the first Black scholarship player at Auburn, that says a lot about him and his character. Again, for the white schools and the predominantly white schools in the South were not offering scholarships to Black athletes at that time. So that really says a lot that Auburn thought a lot of him and offered him that scholarship. So,
well, I think he was. I think Tennessee had some Black athletes at the time in Kentucky, but I think that was it when James came in, and we talk about James and we give James a lot of credit, but then there was Henry, who was before James, Henry Harris, and James has said on many occasions that if it wasn't for Henry, he would have left because it was tough. I love he had one. He had one sentence where he said, I quit every day for the first 3 years. He said, wow. I'd wake up that morning and say, okay, that's it. I can't do this no more. It. And he said, I just thought about all those people. He said, when I ran out on those field, and those people, man, he said, they just cheered. And it was like, I finally realized that this wasn't about me. This was about people who were coming behind me. So, anything else from either one of you before we move on? Okay. Were you going to say something? No. Oh, okay.
Well,
go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I just have to bring this up, and we've discussed it, where many universities across the nation are honoring their first Black athletes or first Black football players, either with a plaque or a statue. I saw where Texas did it. I know Iowa State, I think, mentioned to you, they named their stadium. I don't understand why Auburn can't do anything. And
I agree with you totally. I agree with you totally.
Yeah, well, you won't get any argument from me. And Becky Davis says, he preached at my father's funeral. So blessed he did. That was one of the things that James did after he played and he became a minister. And there were at least, I know, a couple of our teammates who died, and he preached at their funerals. He was just a special guy. And I think, as you said, he was royalty, but everybody on that team respected him. And for me, it was great because I was James' friend, so nobody was going to bother me as long as I was James's friend.
Right.
So that worked. That worked, but it was just special. I was redshirted his junior year, but I traveled with the traveling squad, and it was to just be his teammate. To be his, not just his teammate, but to be his friend. And so I'm proud of the university. And I agree with you 100%, Michael. I don't understand. Vanderbilt named a 6-block stretch of street after the first African-American athlete at Vanderbilt. And why, I don't know. But maybe in the future, who knows? So anything else before we move on? Okay, well, let's move on to our Best Girl message, and then we'll go from there. Today's show is sponsored by Best Girl Inc. What is Best Girl? Best Girl is a consulting firm that provides customized leadership, access and inclusion, public relations, communications, and organizational consulting services. Our clients include Fortune 500 companies, utilities, higher education institutions, small businesses, and associations. We have a team of consultants led by Joyce Gilly Gossom and Miss Emily Hedrick, and they partner with business and education business clients to promote organizational effectiveness and education, motivation, and leadership. Our customized consulting services include strategic planning, corporate communications, executive coaching, fundraising, and some economic development. Well, let's move on to the G list, where everybody is a star. Hollywood has the A list, and here on Tuesdays with Thom, we have the G list. If courage is the theme of our show today, let's talk about courage from another perspective. Maybe something a little heavier, that's a little heavier lift than a football game. But Ann Tucker is the chairman of the Tribal Council of the Muscogee Nation of Florida. She has a BA from Florida State in cultural anthropology and an MPA from Troy State in public administration. As I said, she's the current chairwoman of the Muscogee Nation of Florida, the Florida tribe of Eastern Creek Indians, located in the Bruce Indian community of Walton County, Florida. Members of her community are directly attached to the Creek towns affected by the Treaty of Fort Jackson prior to 1814, as determined by the Department of the Interior Bureau of Indian Affairs. There's a whole bunch more, but we're going to get into that, so I'm just going to welcome her this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. It's nice to be here with you.
Well, good. It's great to have you here. So I'm just going to start out with a very open-ended question. Give me some history of your nation and your tribe.
Our history goes back to when Florida belonged to the Spanish. West Florida extended from, I guess, what is now modern Jackson County over into Mississippi. And we lived in Bruce and in Uchee Valley with the Spanish. We're documented there as early as 1767. We think they just kind of put us here to cause trouble with the British. So when Spain turned over West Florida to the British, we moved up the Choctawhatchee River to Alabama. And then when the British gave it back, they obviously didn't want us. Came back down with the Spanish. So we've been here since before Florida was a state, in the same little community.
Okay. All right. And you're tell us about being the I don't want to use the term chief, but the chair. So tell me how that works.
I'll tell you how this works, because it worked here sort of like it did way back in Seminole in the old days. You get 4 sticks, and whoever draws the short stick has to deal with the government. So I can't, the old people call me back. I had served for about 20 years and said I wasn't serving anymore. And they call me back, and they had black and white stones that they voted on who would be the chair. But at the time, I didn't know that they had stopped elections so that whoever got into this position couldn't get out. So I've been stuck in this position for quite some while, quite some time now. And the government and I have had many adventures together.
And when you say the government, you're talking about the government of the U.S.?
Yes, our tribe is one of basically 3 tribes that are petitioning for federal recognition with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And this year marks year number 75 that we have petitioned.
Year number what? Are you cut
75.
out? Oh
number
God.
75. And in 1947, the Bureau of Indian Affairs realized they hadn't paid for the land they took with the Treaty of Fort Jackson. So they were going to try to settle this. And my great-grandfather wrote and said, that's where we lived. And they said, no, you're removed or you're dead. And he said, no, I'm still in Bruce, Florida. So it took a lawsuit of 10 years for the Bureau to admit they hadn't removed all the Creek people to Oklahoma. And he thought it would make us federally recognized when we finally got this land claim settlement, which it took until 1971 for Congress to appropriate the funds. And we each got a check for $123 for where Montgomery's located.
Oh my God.
And figured out then that we had to go through chapter 25 of the congressional records, which is it's called Indians. And so there's a small procedure in there. And so far, our tribe has filed over 10,000 pieces of paper, because in the United States, you still have to prove to the agent of the government that you're American Indian. Even
Wow.
though my family had land claim settlements from the Treaty of Fort Jackson, we still now have to go through another process to prove to the Bureau that we're who we say we are. And we're Creek Yuchi people. We're a blended people. And our language is probably closer to Coshada in Louisiana. Yuchi language was a guttural language, so we're trying to recover our language. It's very, very hard. Recognition as a whole, I think people have a different view on what it means, because it enables our children to have education, and it lets us get Head Start. It puts health programs in here. It helps us become an 8A contractor, so that, let's say, helicopter parts aren't made in an Alaska corporation. They can be made here for Eglin Air Force Base. There are some environmental concerns that become important to Indian tribes. So basically, when you're in this position I'm in, we're filing for a government-to-government relationship with the United States.
Oh, wow.
And that's usually not a very happy place to be.
Does it vary, or does it change? We just had an election in the United States.
Yes,
So will
every
your
election,
relationship will change?
every election, we have to re-educate whoever goes into office.
Wow.
And then we have to watch the administration to figure out if they're going to be Indian friendly, because for non-federal tribes. During, I think, the Bush administration, there was not one tribe recognized. So you're just sitting in a whole pattern. And we do have hopes for Biden's administration because of the outpouring with COVID and how it affects our Native communities.
Wow.
Right now, I'm coming to you from my living room, because our council house was built in 1880. It was a school, and we've kept it in its original state. So it's extremely cold in the winter, and it's extremely hot in the summer. So I thought it would be more comfortable here with you this morning.
Okay. I mean, I think this is I know it's very educational for me. I want to bring Barbara and Mychal in. And I'm sure it's educational for our audience as well. Barbara, you got any questions, comments before I move on?
The comment first. Let me say it is very educational for me. I had no idea that that any of the Creek, the Indian tribes had to go through this much to try to get recognized. That's unbelievable. So why so long? What kind of excuses are the government using to not recognize your tribe?
My favorite one, because there have been a number of them, my favorite one was I brought in our answer to what was a technical review letter. And I answered the letter line by line. I would put their line of the letter, and then we'd have all our evidence and documents. So I took it all up there, and the man said, well, you missed this sentence from the last change. And I said, well, what is this sentence? He says, well, everything has to now be digitized and sorted 4 ways. And I said, that's $1 million worth of work. I mean, there's just no way. So, in fact, it was more than that. And when we turned all of the data in, we received another technical review letter. And this letter now that we have, I've been working on since 2016, because we were hit by Mychal in between. And it's basically deciding that they want to undo the Treaty of Fort Jackson that they set in place with us in the beginning. So now we're dealing with genealogy, we're dealing with political sides of it, and now we're dealing with legislative as well. It becomes difficult for Southeastern Indians, and it does, because when we were removed, which was a Holocaust inside the United States border, a lot of the Southern tribes made it illegal to be Indian. So in our case, in Florida, 1853 passed a law that you could not live freely in the state of Florida. Well, the government looks at their white paper, as we call it, government paper, to decide who you are. Here, we couldn't be. We could either be a Black, we could be white, or we could be an other. So I voted as an other until affirmative action. And about a month ago, my mother, who is 97, she's the first educated member of our community. She was asking me to go through some of her papers, and I found a voter card from 1958 where they had scratched through white and they had finally written AMIN. And the supervisor who gave it to me didn't know what it meant. And I said, it means American Indian. So she stood up and changed her race when it was really illegal to do so, because the law stayed on the books until the Civil Rights Act.
Man, that's amazing. Yeah. You know,
Wow.
we watch
Amazing.
old westerns, and we watch
Yes.
these fictional things.
Yes.
And nobody, well, I say nobody, but I certainly didn't imagine that these things were still going on. We talk about it in the past as though it's been solved. You know, where we quote, we did this to them, but everything's great now.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not the case.
Even today, if you look at the standards on some of the Navajo reservations and the Sioux reservations, they don't have indoor plumbing. They don't have 12 people will live in a small trailer. You know, it's a very difficult situation. What we want from the Bureau, and what we've always told them, we don't want their programs necessarily. We just want a hand up. And then we'll have the right to access many government programs and grants, and we can build our own future that way. It's a difficult scenario. It's hard to find good allies in Indian country. People find that hard to believe. They go, how can that be? When you're an indigenous people, it's best to keep you at each other's throats, because that's how you can control people. So we're very fortunate that Coshawta tribe has extended their hand to us. Yeah. And has backed our federal recognition. So I have hopes that our technical review will be in the first of the year, and it will go into the Biden administration.
Okay, good. Mychal.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes. Well, good morning, Ann. It's such a pleasure to meet and speak with you. And
good morning.
Thank you. It's so many similarities between the American Indians and African Americans in this country.
Yes, it is.
You know, one comment that I have to say first, and I have several questions, as I always do. Everybody will tell you that. But the first comment is, so they take everything away from you that says that you're Indian, then tell you you got to prove yourself to be Indian.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Got that. All right. Understood. Okay. Well,
That's not much further, how much further you can go with that.
There's nothing else I can say, man.
And I've said so many times that makes me angry and sad at the very same time. You know, that bothers me. I just don't understand.
And you have to realize the Confederacy that I was from, the Creek Confederacy, it had 187 towns and it had 28 languages. And it had a trade language. So the people moving in, all these settlers, they couldn't speak English. You know, I mean, they couldn't speak Muscogee or they couldn't speak Hidjeti. So they would write your name down, however they could try to figure out how to sound it out. And the census records that they took back in the early 1800s were burned up in a fire, naturally. And so you have to work from a point of maybe you've got a mixed blood that was married to an Indian trader, because the Scott Irish had all the trading licenses. So you have to be able to go back in time. And in Bruce, we go back 8 generations here. My family has always come to Mossy Bay and the Yuchi homeland. But when Andrew Jackson invaded Florida illegally, we would move up to Alabama and then we'd come back and then we'd move up and back. So when you're looking for historical research, it becomes complex, because you have to figure out all that was going around you in terms of the government and where you fit into that picture. And in the 50s, with the civil rights movement, I think the civil rights movement is what gave us that strength to stand up in Florida here. we've always said that that was our stimulus to stand up and say, we don't have to be here anymore without you knowing who we are. So I was finally racially properly identified in 1971.
Wow.
Wow.
Mychal?
And for those who do not understand, I see where you're an advocate for
Yes.
sovereign rights of Indians.
Yes.
Please
Yes.
tell us exactly what sovereign rights are and what does that mean?
The sovereign rights, it's a traditional law and it's a modern law. Our sovereign rights mean that we have the right to decide what happens to our people. We have the right to control how our land is run. We have a sovereign right to rebury our dead. We have the right to have for something as simple as arts and crafts, because this is shell. It's one of our shell carvers. He can't put his things in like a Smithsonian museum because we do not have sovereign rights.
Wow.
So that right with the government is very, very important. It becomes a matter of if a crime happens, let's say on reservation land, then we have the right to deal with that issue traditionally, and it's important with our ceremonies. So for us, for me personally, now in this era, in this age, to me, sovereignty is going to be the difference of us existing or us going away. We'll have the rights then to help our people get adequate housing, to help our people get health and education. And that's a very, very difficult situation in rural, poor communities for Indian people. I tell people that Indian tribes are only as good as their government, and we're a government that wants to try to raise our people up. So to us, sovereignty is going to be our future, or else people pass in the wind. Does that help you? Does that answer that?
Yes, it does.
Yes. I was very lucky, and I did want to tell you that the tribe was fortunate to get an Impact 100 grant. And so our council house, which is built in 1880, when we came to Florida, the man who led us here said, you cannot live unless you can at least get the rudiments of how to read and write. So we built a little school. It was one room, and it was a school, and it was the heart of the community. And it was where the women would can and quilt, and the men would have their meetings and hunt. And it was hit when the hurricane changed the sound in Destin. We had a tornado, so it became a 3-room schoolhouse. So the flooring of our council house goes back to the 1880s. And it's 3 rooms, and plus it's got a cookhouse on it. And this is what we want to turn into a knowledge center for children, for people coming into the area to be able to interactively see and understand who we were as the people who have lived here and watched this place change. So we are just really grateful to Impact 100. COVID has dealt us a blow on it like it has everybody else. But I believe in the end, this is going to be a museum that Walton County can be proud of. And I believe Indian people will be proud of.
Let me offer a little Mychal, I think you got another question, but let me offer a little clarification. Impact 100 is a group of women in Walton and Okaloosa County, Florida. At this point, I think it's 400 women, maybe close to, I think there's 400 this year. But they agreed to put up $1,000 each. And at the end of the year, then they award $100,000 grants and to 4 different organizations. It's an incredible organization. Joyce, my wife, is a part of the organization, which is how we know Mrs. Tucker. But so I think you guys may have gotten $100,000 grant. They
Yes.
give away the 400,000, yes. And so that's what Impact 100 is. And so they awarded, the Impact has 448 women this year. Joyce just put it in the chat. So that means that they would raise $448,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mychal,
So
go ahead.
with that, I'm sorry. With what we have, we just received 8 interactive computers on stands, so that you can come in and press a button, and it's going to show you a short film, like one of our old net makers. One of the favorite questions at our council house is how do you research? How do you find who you are? So I have a genealogist on file that's on tape now that's showing that, showing how our ceremonies are. Our ceremonies and our traditions that we still have. Watching a man carve shell. It'll be a basic understanding of who we are as Indian people and as the indigenous people of the area. What can I do for you, Mychal? Is it a hard question?
Well, I've got several. I'm the question
Okay.
man on the panel, but
Oh, okay.
let me ask you this question. Tell us a little bit about Senate Bill 530 and what was that experience like back in 2009 when you went before Congress?
Yes, I went before Congress. I've been in front of the United States Senate Committee on Indian Affairs and the House Resources Committee on Insular Affairs. And I went in because I knew that for Southeastern tribes and the histories that surround a Holocaust and then a Civil War, that this system was a system of failure. The GAO, the General Accounting Office, had investigated the procedure for recognition. And one of the main things is external identification. If you're not allowed legally to be who you are, how are you externally identified? So I took the issue to the U.S. Senate Committee and to the House Resources Committee, and also to try to help legislatively move this tribe's recognition. It was a, you talk about a courageous experience. I'm from a community of 200 people, and I was walking in there with friends and lobbyists and people trying to help us, people that didn't know us, but once they did, they knew it was a just cause. But I was the rookie, and they promised me nobody would ask me a question. So I did my 5 minutes. I had to do our entire history in 5 minutes. And they told me, now you have 5 minutes, watch the timer. You have to watch the man that you're talking to and watch what you're reading all at the same time, which I don't have 3 eyes. So I tried my best to memorize most of it. So the first thing that happened, though, was there were 2 women sitting on the committee, and I'm thinking, oh no, I'm the only woman that's testified since Wilma Mankiller. Oh no, this is not going to work well for me. And the first words out of their mouth was, Chairwoman, if you could. And I thought, oh no. It was in the House Resources Committee that had about 35 people. And I had a friend that's an attorney, and he was keeping watch, counting them coming and going. And he would tap me and go, all 35 have been here, Annie. That one, they put me in the very center of the panel. And you're in trouble when you're in the center of the panel. That's going to be the one. And plus, you're the only woman sitting there, too. Yeah. Yeah. It was an amazing thing to see how this works and to learn about government. And I really hope they still teach civics, because I'm really beginning to wonder these days. Yeah. But for me, I had bipartisan legislation. This isn't a partisan issue. This is an issue about people. And so I had bipartisan legislation up until Congressman Miller. He did try to help us too. With this now, I'm simply trying to answer their last 39-page set of questions. Wow. And then I'll probably end up back in front of Congress or in court. So it's been an interesting journey. My friend says that it's the struggle that makes the journey, and that journey is successful because of the struggle. So that's the words I keep keeping in my mind.
So let me clarify. Joyce said that Impact 100 has given away $3.1 million since 2012.
Yes, these are wonderful women.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
And it's what I love about it. I have worked with federal grant agencies. I'm a consultant on occasion with the Administration for Native Americans. With Impact 100, what is so good about it is it's focusing on local. It's local funding for this area. And there's so many programs out there, nonprofits, that need this sort of funding, and they need this funding to be localized. We have the Impact 100, and we're also trying to finish out a sustainable agriculture program so that we're doing tank fish in terms of tilapia so that there's a safe food source. The food issue with Native people is creating a tremendous amount of side effects and allergies from the chemicals in our food. I'm sure it's doing this to most people. So attached to our council house is 9 acres that we're trying to create sustainable farming methods that don't use the chemicals and create a good, healthy food source. And this is what we want to do with a partnership with kids, is bring them to the farm and also let them go through the museum and learn about their history here.
So let me ask you a question. I'm gonna get Barbara, and then we'll come back to Mychal again. So you mentioned former Congressman Jeff Miller, I think it was his name.
Yes.
So do you guys have a representative, a congressional representative, a senator, and do you get to vote for them as well? I know these are probably some questions, but I don't know.
No, Native people got the vote the same year as women. 1924. Okay. We were living in Bruce, and my council house is our voting poll. So we just go vote at the council house. Okay. In terms of who is behind us now, it's a touchy subject, I think. I would call it that. Our territory goes past Tallahassee. I'm hoping Al Lawson will visit with us. Okay. Is that a way to put that?
Okay.
He wants to. I can't. I'm not as tactful as Joe Biden. The relationship with the congressman, I'm hoping, will improve.
Is this Congressman Gates?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
The one who had the mask on. Yes.
I understand.
Yes, I would like for him to help his constituents in Northwest Florida, especially after 75 years.
Okay.
So,
Barbara?
and you may have already answered this question. I thought I heard you say that you live in a community of like 300, 200, 300 people. But I was going to ask, what's the number of people that lives a part of the Muscogee Nation there in Florida?
There's in Florida, Nation. There's probably 300 in this general area and the state. We have 604 members. That's a small number. Okay. It's not really representative of all of the families because of the regulations of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. In Bruce, we were a community that had our own school. We have a Native American designated church. We had 2 cemeteries. We basically lived together, married one another with second cousin exchange marriage, and we buried each other. So we're still a functioning living community. But outside of us are multiple communities that once we're federally recognized, we plan to help. We will extend a hand and help. Right. Did that answer that?
Yeah. Yes, it did. Thank you.
Mychal, I think we're back to you.
Okay. Well, Ann, I was going to ask you about your position on reparation, but since you told me that you got $101 for what's now known as I guess that's out of the question. So I'll just move on to the next. What's your position? You go ahead and comment on it.
When that check, I told my mom, I said, whatever possessed you to keep up with this once you saw a $123 check? And she said, and I was looking at these old people and I'm like, what am I going to do? I was leading geriatric people, and they had called me back and I said, why would you be possessed to do this? And she said, because of everything they took away. And how do you fight with that? How do you
Yeah.
fight with that when they say because of everything
Right.
they took from us?
Yeah. 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 I understand. Um, the other question that I would bring on, and maybe we have to get together and talk about reparations if we
Yeah.
can't do something from a standpoint of American Indians and African Americans and get that push forward. But that'll be a subject for another day. I wanted to bring something a little bit to the forefront that's also political, and sometimes they call it political correctness and what have you. What's your position when it comes to sports teams having mascots or being named after, say, the Atlanta Braves or the Seminoles in Florida? How does that work and what have you? Because I've heard different things. Some
Mhm.
American Indians are against it, and like
Mhm.
the Washington football team used to be
Yeah.
the Washington Redskins, so
Yeah.
they had to change their name. But then you have other teams, like I understand that Florida State got approval to be called the
Yeah.
Seminoles. Give me an explanation as to how that works.
I really like what the Seminoles did. When this issue came up, and it is a volatile issue, especially with the American Indian movement, with Seminole, what they do is when the man comes out who's riding the horse, he goes down to Seminole and he learns who and what he's representing, so that it's an entire education about the traditions of this man. What happens is when they hang the other team in effigy, they're not considering that you're hanging an Indian. When you call it the Braves, and we're looking at each other going, "Oh, are they talking about us?" That's when this truly becomes an issue. I'm not as sensitive about it because of where I grew up and what we already know about this area. But especially in the Western tribes, there's a great sensitivity for this. We're a small tribe. Like I said, with the Seminoles, I think they did this the right way. Redskin is basically an offensive term for us. And I believe that they could be woodchucks or something and not have a problem. Or, just
Mhm.
a name that doesn't degrade us any more than has already happened in our history.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Does
Absolutely. That's what I just wanted to hear.
Yeah, yeah. With the education, if they do the education with it, it changes things. It changes your feeling when you're, in this case, the Seminoles, when you're on that horse, you understand what you represent.
Hmm.
When it's just a big blanket, the Braves. Well, all right, so the Bears come in and they don't like them and they hang them up there. Well, I'm not sure who they're hanging, if they're hanging a Brave or me. So,
Yeah.
in simple terms.
Right.
So you were going to ask, Ms.
Yeah. What I mean, there is. I mean, this has been very, very educational. What would you want people to know? I mean, the average person walking around who just doesn't have a clue. I mean, I never knew where Bruce was until I saw this. And then
That's
and then there is a quote tribe of people that are living in Bruce have been
Yeah.
living there forever. So
Yeah.
if you had to, you just talked about the Seminole, if you had to educate somebody briefly, what would you tell them?
That we are still here. We have never left. We are here. We are your past. We hope to be your future. That's what I tell people. Muscogee people we were one of the 5 civilized tribes. Over half of us died. People need to understand Indian history. They need to understand what has happened to indigenous people. And they need to understand, as you were saying, that when you see something on TV and it's an Indian movie, that's not reflective of a reality that is very hard these days. It's been very harsh. So what I would want them to do is educate themselves about who we are and what we stand for. And tread softly because we're the first. Is that?
Yeah. That's yeah, thank you. Let's maybe we can wrap up another round here. Anybody got any further comments or questions? And Barbara, Mychal.
The one thing
I just want to say. Go ahead,
Yes.
Ann. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I just wanted both of you to know
No, you
that I
please.
would love for you to come to our council house and sit down and visit and talk with us.
We'd love to
I
do
would
that.
love that. Thank you for the
We'd love
invite.
to do that. We'll
Yes.
work that out.
Yes,
That
definitely.
would be
Thank
great.
you.
That would be great. Daryl says very interesting show, very informative and educational, but not surprising. Good morning, Big D. I hope you're doing well. Mychal, you got anything else further?
Well, just some comments in closing. And thank you very much for coming and participating on our show. It was, as Thom has said, and Barbara, it was very educational, and I think it was enlightening for people that listen. And at the same time, we got some affirmation or confirmation, if you will, that your plight has been the same as the plight of African Americans. And and you said one thing about them trying to keep you separate and apart. That's that age-old formula that had been implemented for years and years. And it took me back to the Willie Lynch story of the guy that came down from England to go to the Caribbean to talk to the plantation owners about how to control their slaves. When he said, I'm going to give you the formula to last forever, which is you divide the old against the young, the women against the men, the field slaves against the in-house slaves and what have you. And then that way you will not have to kill your slaves and what have you. They will control themselves. So when you said that, it took me back to that. And they're still employing that today.
Yes, they are. They our census takers would judge on sight. You were either determined to be white, black, mulatto, because there was no place for Indian. So it's been a judgment and a difficult time just to exist, just to still be. I think when I'm looking at the old people who I never could catch on to when I was younger, I understand now why they struggle so hard. I'm a painter. There's a lot of things that I can do besides what I'm doing, but I understand why it's important and that it's a struggle that is hopefully going to come into a path where we can stand and be equal and sit at the table with the other tribes. Because right now, without the recognition, we can't have a place at the table. And I know you understand how that is.
Yes, absolutely.
I thought this was interesting. On October 30th of this year, President Donald Trump issued a proclamation designating November 2020 as National Native American Heritage Month. This November and every month, they celebrate the culture and heritage of these remarkable Americans who deeply enriched the quality and character of our nation. That's sort of surprising.
That was interesting. The code talkers in front of Andrew Jackson's painting was even more interesting.
I bet.
Well, we appreciate knowing that November and Thanksgiving, which has its own history,
right,
was recognized.
I think we talk about diversity and we talk about it in terms of our institutions, and you really understand that people don't know, and ignorance is not an excuse. I always say ignorance is not bliss, but it would just help if people would be a little more educated and would educate themselves.
I'm hoping that Impact 100 at least reaches out to the visitors to the area and to the children and help them understand what it means to be Indigenous, because it comes with its own set of baggage, as each of you know.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you
Yes.
so much. It was so wonderful. It was educational. Just thank you. We appreciate it, and hopefully we'll get you back
Yes.
and we'll talk some more.
Yes, I would like that, and I would love for you guys to come and to visit the council house as well.
We will promise you that we will do that. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Let
Yes.
me issue my closing comments here, and this is actually a spiritual phrase from that I looked up from a Native American chief. It says, "May the sun bring you new energy by day. May the moon softly restore you by night. May the rain wash away your worries. May the breeze blow new strength into your being. May you walk gently through the world and know its beauty all the days of your life." And then another quick topic is the journey between who you once were and who you are now becoming is where the dance of life really takes place. So we want to thank everybody. We certainly want to thank Ann Tucker. We want to thank Mychal and Barbara and the communicator for her great work. Thank our sponsor, Best Girl. If you're interested in have your business be a sponsor of the show, get in touch with us at Thom at Best Girl. Thank Emily Hedrick, our communicator and producer. That's a wrap. Enjoy yourself. Every day counts, and peace.